There's an intensity propensity during this new moon. The question is, how do we best wrap up this Scorpio season and emerge transformed? The philosophy at the foundation of this approach of evolutionary astrology is the idea that as soul incarnates, the purpose of life is to evolve, to learn, to grow, and to expand our consciousness. And the planets represent energies, archetypal energies, that do affect us. We are not the planet's playthings, but they do influence us. And these energies tend to feel a certain way and synchronistically attract to us certain types of experiences so that we can learn what we need to be learning during that time. I'll be looking at the core themes of this new moon event and all the planetary players involved so that you, with your own free will and conscious awareness, can be working with these events consciously instead of subconsciously for our own betterment and evolution. If you find this video meaningful, please spread the word. It helps me to get my message out to more people. This Scorpio new moon occurs on November 20th at about 6:47 a.m. UK time, 1:47 a.m. Eastern time, and that's when we hit the exactitude of it. But keep in mind that the new moon phase lasts for about 4 days thereafter. So you can work with these events as I described them, really over the next 4 or 5 days. The biggest theme in the sky right now is we have 7 of the 10 planets all in water signs. We have 4 planets in Scorpio, 2 planets in Pisces, and 1 in Cancer. The other big theme is that we have half of the planets retrograde. Jupiter, Neptune, Saturn, Uranus, and Mercury are all retrograde right now. Most significantly, Saturn is in the process of going direct, so therefore it is slowing down in the sky from our perspective here on Earth, and it's about to change directions. It's called stationing. So it's retrograde stationed, and of all the retrograde planets, it's going to be the strongest because of that. Also of note, we have a grand water trine between Saturn, Neptune, Jupiter, and the new moon. And lastly, Uranus is in a direct opposition to this new moon. And I'll point out that the new moon, sun, moon, and Mercury are all at the same degree, 28 degrees of Scorpio. So water is the dominant element now, and all water signs represent the emotional and subjective plane. They govern our reflexive behavior, our instincts, our intuition, the astral or fourth dimension, if you want to use more mystical language. They're inward. So most of the growth on Earth, amongst the collective and in a lot of individual lives, will happen through people's inward subjective journey. Now, retrograde planets, the archetypes associated with them, are more introverted. They have a more reflective tendency. So, although retrograde planets and water signs are very different from each other, that is the one thing connecting both of them. There's a strong emphasis now towards the inward, the internal. Most growth happening through our reflection, contemplation, surrender, going within, traversing the inner worlds, essentially. Now, of course, the strongest sign is Scorpio, right? 4 planets in this sign. Not only that, this sign is said to have 2 planets that rule it, Pluto and Mars. And Pluto's in a beautiful sextile, a 60-degree angle to this new moon. And Mars, although it's in the next sign of Sagittarius, it's a bit far from being a conjunction with the new moon. Pretty much a day after the new moon, while we're still in the new moon phase, the moon will join up with Mars as well. So much scorpionic energy in the sky. Each symbol in astrology represents a spectrum of possibilities. There's a higher octave, more virtuous side of Scorpio, and a very positive lesson therein, an evolutionary goal, if you will. And then there's an extension of egoism or dark side or shadow side of this sign as well. Now, the shadow side of Scorpio is linked to the idea that this is known as the most intense sign in the zodiac. So when we talk about emotional aspect of this, it does lean more towards emotional intensity, where people above average will feel more turbulent in their own hearts. This event tends to kick up the dust of the psyche. Now, if we're just kind of going through life and this is affecting us subconsciously, this can synchronistically attract to us experiences that are custom designed to trigger us, to create a bit of a psychodrama in our lives so that we can figure out how best to work with this set of intense emotions. So people do tend to get more triggered during Scorpio season. This does create an astral turbulence, if you will. And another core shadow side of Scorpio is a general moodiness, a heaviness, and a brooding if people are not working with these energies in a more powerful way. There is a very powerful lesson here. It's connected to one of the archetypes of this sign, which is that of the shaman. Now, in some of those shamanic traditions, they have a belief that when a soul goes through a great trauma, whether in this life or past lives, it's like a shard of their soul has gotten broken off at that location in the lower astral planes. And you can literally work with a shaman and do what they call journeying, where they enter into a meditative trance. They visualize themselves going into a hole in the ground or a knot in the tree and traveling literally into the underworld. That's their terminology. Classic Scorpionic and Plutonian symbolism. And they meet with their power animals. The power animals guide them to that location in the lower hell world, so-called, or astral plane, so that the shaman can retrieve that person's lost soul shard. They call it soul retrieval work, which is a beautiful metaphor for this new moon event. New moons are fundamentally about new beginnings. So during all this water energy, all this soul retrieval symbolism, the phoenix diving into the ashes to come up reborn, what new emotional insights can I have about these wounds? And then what actions can I take to help facilitate this process of soul retrieval? This is ultimately about the core evolutionary intention of transmuting darkness into light. Astrology is very much about synchronicity, and during this Scorpio season, be aware that you may attract to yourself situations, people, whatever, that are custom designed to trigger you. Not to be a pain in your butt, but to function as a sounding board for your own wounded places and your own what I call trigger point emotions, and to practice conscious awareness about those triggers as they come, and then go through the process of transmuting that pain into light, darkness into light. Why? To become lighthouses, to dissipate darkness obstructing your life light and your own soul energy. Now, with this grand water trine happening, there is great healing potential, especially with Jupiter in the mix, the so-called lucky planet, the expansive planet. And there is good fortune associated with it, that's for sure. And here it is in the sign of Cancer, the sign of the healer. But there's always a big if, and that if is if we're consciously working with these energies instead of just allowing them to flow haphazardly through our lives. And Jupiter is whispering into our ears, hey, believe in yourself. Take steps towards this process of transmutation. Now, what about Saturn? Saturn's known as the greater malefic, and it's seen as kind of a bad planet from the perspective of a lot of folks. Even myself sometimes right now, Saturn is square my sun and oppose my moon, and I'm definitely feeling the weight of this planet right now. But Saturn is not bad at all. Saturn's demanding. He asks for us to focus, to be committed, to practice diligence and discipline. These are beautiful Saturnian virtues that we're being called to leverage during this time to help accomplish this goal of soul retrieval. Saturn is currently in Pisces and holding hands with Neptune, really doubling the mystical energy, because Neptune and Pisces are all associated with that archetype. So the discipline and focus and commitment is really connected towards the process of raising our consciousness and spiritually evolving. And when we're in Scorpio season, a good thing to say about this, in big fat air quotes, is we need therapy during this time. Now, what I mean by that is not really talk therapy. I want to honor talk therapy, but in this particular case, it's not the right tool for the job. It's not the right medicine because there's so much mystic energy in the sky. This is about sacred initiation, feels more ritualistic and mystical through different levels of consciousness, because these traumas are not housed in our conscious brain. They're in our subconscious. And when we're talking, okay, our ego pretty much is online, and one of the functions of the ego is to be a guardian of the subconsciousness, to protect it. So to work in trance states relaxes that ego. It steps out of the way so that the subconscious becomes more malleable and easier to work with. And there's some suggestions I can make here, but I want to dance away for a moment and just say a couple things about Pluto in Aquarius, which is sextile the new moon. You know, Pluto is going to be in Aquarius for almost the next 20 years. It's really a sub-generational shift that we've had somewhat recently. And I've talked about this many times. It's one of its core aspects is an extreme technological revolution where we are rapidly evolving on a technological level at light speed, so fast it is blinding. Now, one of the negative consequences of this, since Pluto also represents a trauma in the collective psyche, it can lead to people checking out into their heads, not into their hearts. Okay, or really leaving their hearts into their heads, because Aquarius is an air sign. All air signs are on the mental plane. So entering into the minds through technology into various virtual realities. For those nerds out there, fellow nerds, I say affectionately, Star Trek. There's something called the holodeck in Star Trek, where people on the ship, there's a specific room that the crewmates can go into, and they can create any virtual reality that they want, and it's as if they're in that. And in the coming years, I think we will have access to something similar as Pluto continues through Aquarius. So we'll have these many layers of fake realities. We even have them now through video games and various things like this. So people, one of the challenges of Pluto and Aquarius is people will get lost in this mindscape or dreamscape. And some people, many people, will get disconnected from their own humaneness and from their heart because they're traversing alternate realities through their head. And also because of this is linked to the idea that Aquarius isn't a fixed sign. All fixed signs have a shadow side of rigidity, okay, of the mind, cementing our neural nets, if you will. So I've kind of gone off into bigger picture stuff over the next couple of decades, but this will be a core challenge for humanity. The rigidity of the mind and the neural net as we get lost in the mindscape. So therefore, it will be very healthy for us to transform our minds. Now, how do you do that with rigidity? Through what's called neuroplasticity. So we take this more big picture idea that the collective can benefit greatly from in their transformational process, and then we zero it back into now, into this grand water trine, this shamanic soul retrieval ceremonial time. Okay, how can we leverage techniques, not necessarily talk therapy, which can even cement further that rigidity, okay, to really do more therapeutic techniques that help with the plasticity. And there's many ways of doing it. I mean, there's pretty intense breath work. Some of them are very effective. Shadow work, journaling, hypnosis is very powerful. Psychedelics, of course. A strong intention plus integration. I'm not talking about recreational psychedelics. Many people report after, for example, an ayahuasca ceremony that like 90% of their rage disappeared through that process. And it's not even a virtue. It's just suddenly not there anymore because they're not there anymore in the form they were earlier. They've been significantly changed by, dare I say, the psychedelic experience of the divine. And I'm totally open to that being a profound way of working with this new moon. It's not everybody's cup of tea. It's not my personal cup of tea. In fact, I think this is a little bit dogmatic and biased, but I think it's kind of a shortcut and cheating, although I recognize the value in it. But we can have much more profound, ecstatic, blissful spiritual experiences naturally through an intense daily meditation practice. Now, most people don't have the discipline to do that consistently over time. You know, if somebody trains for, 2 or 3 hours every morning, they're going to have some profound experiences that psychedelics can't even touch. But it requires that commitment. Saturn and Pisces holding hands with Neptune. That's, in my opinion, this is one of the most powerful ways anybody can work with these events really over the coming years here as Saturn continues to conjunct Neptune in the sky. But now we're specifically connecting it to this idea of soul retrieval. So good evolutionary questions to ask yourself during this new moon is, what does this so-called soul retrieval mean for me? And how can I seek out that type of experience? Now, again, as this is occurring, you have Uranus directly opposite this new moon. And Uranus goes by many names. One of them is the Great Awakener. It represents the process of individuation, which means becoming a truer expression of your authentic self. Uranus really is the guardian to our true selves. So the question becomes, how do these past traumas obstruct my authentic expression? Now, these past traumas tend to create what I call trigger point emotions in our subconsciousness, where as we navigate our daily life, we might run up against a situation, let's say, that reminds our subconscious of the original traumatic event that created that suppressed or repressed emotional state of consciousness, and then it gets triggered within us. Okay, so that's part of it. But even beyond that, these exert an unseen magnetic field altering our course through life, usually in unfortunate ways. For example, let's say somebody goes through a horrible sexual trauma in childhood, and then we fast forward, that person's like 20 years old or maybe older, and they have a fear of being touched. And we can look at that trajectory and we can feel so much compassion for that person, right? But there is the trigger, but then also there is the fear consciousness exerting that field, altering their course through life, and they're completely avoiding areas of their life which, if they weren't traumatized, they may embrace fully. And this has a mitigating effect upon one's liberation of the authentic expression. Uranus. Now, when talking about soul retrieval and Uranus, it's usually the big three: a rejection, betrayal, and abandonment of our unique expression. So a good question to ask is, how have my past traumas impacted my capacity for liberated self-expression? New moons are great for setting strong new intentions. A powerful one would be, okay, I'm ready for sudden transformation. Sudden is connected to Uranus, transformation is Scorpio. Uranus is known as the god of earthquakes and lightning bolts, and here it is opposed to all the shamanic energy. We are poised for a radical snap of the finger transmutation of past trauma. So how do we wrap up this Scorpio season? We wrap it up by becoming the shaman, essentially. By diving into those depths, not to dwell there necessarily, but to retrieve the fragmented pieces of our soul that we left behind in those moments of trauma. We wrap it up by setting the intention for that Uranian lightning bolt breakthrough, that sudden, radical transformation where the unseen magnetic field of our woundedness no longer dictates our course. This is the moment where we stop allowing our past traumas to obstruct the full brilliance of who we authentically are. The lighthouse doesn't apologize for its light. It doesn't dim itself because it's surrounded by darkness. It burns brighter because of the darkness. And right now, with this grand water trine, with Saturn giving us the discipline, Neptune giving us the mystical access, and Uranus demanding our liberation, we have everything we need to become that lighthouse. The question isn't whether the breakthrough is available. It is. The question is, are we ready to claim it? These are the core evolutionary intentions, with the goal being to expand our consciousness. Thank you for listening.